Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and it is about horror that I wish to speak today. No, do not assume from this graphic that there is a psycho RPG, as awesome as that would be. Um, I have heard from a lot of you out there watching these videos that you'd like me to start doing more commentary kinds of videos. GMing advice, comparisons between different editions, talking about how to use X or Y game element in a game. And so I'm going to do that. And I started today with an easy one because I'm still figuring this whole thing out. I figured a nice commentary video that I could do commenting on the state of the genre would basically just be a rundown of my top 10 horror RPGs. Now, I do not know every horror RPG out there, and there are a lot of them, like Little Fears and Unknown Armies, that I hear about a lot, and I've never had the chance to try. And so maybe they're amazing and belong on this list, but they're not currently on this list. This is just what I have played and what I love. So let's jump into this, and I'll tell you why. Also, you might find out the more that I start doing these kind of commentary videos that I have a deep passion for ranking subjective things. So, not only is this my 10 favorite horror RPGs, they are in order. Let's take a look at this. Savage Worlds, I'm not actually talking about Savage Worlds itself, but number 10 on my list is what I call the You're in a Zombie Apocalypse game. And this is something that I've had the chance to do a couple of different times. I've run it with Dead Rain from Palladium. I've run it with Savage Worlds. I included here on this list actually also Fate Accelerated. I think Fate would be a fantastic way to do this. The point of this is you get a bunch of players together, ideally all from the same place, all from who living in the same city, and then you have them create themselves as characters and then run a game that is a zombie apocalypse. So this is essentially something like The Walking Dead or Night of the Living Dead or whatever, except the players are playing themselves in their own city where they live. Savage Worlds and Fate are really great systems for this because they're so variable. It's easy to create yourself, and you won't feel that you're incredibly hampered by not having fantastic stats in anything. You try to do this in a more balanced game system, and you can easily come across as far more powerful in the game than you are in real life. Whereas you take this into Savage Worlds or Fate or something like that. Fate in particular is just a wonderful way to do this. And then you're just kind of there. And if you're good at it in real life, you can make your character good at it. And if you suck at it in real life, you can make your character suck at it. I'm 43 years old and have been quarantined in my house since March. My physical strength and constitution scores would be pretty low right now if I were to go out and suddenly start running around trying to fight zombies. But what makes this kind of campaign a delight is if you've got a bunch of friends together and you're willing to go to some pretty dark places, then you've got your friend group to work with. You all know the same streets and the same locations. You know which of your neighbors has got a gun safe that you can go and raid to fight off the zombies. And you know which of your neighbors would immediately have fallen to the zombie plague. And now you've got to deal with them and maybe run them over with a car or something. So it can get dark. I had a friend who ran a campaign similar to this once, and his daughter was a player in it, and she had to get up and leave partway through because it just got too real. Now, because you're playing yourselves and because you're playing in your own life. But that said, it can be a really great system and a really great experience if you've never done it before. So try that. Living through your own zombie apocalypse. Number 9 on my list is another one that doesn't really count as a horror game. Fiasco. Fiasco can be about anything. When I play it, it tends to get into horror pretty quickly and easily. I love throwing in, extra supernatural things, or just, the pure non-supernatural horror of bad people making bad decisions. Um, some of my favorite horror gaming experiences have come from Fiasco. Now, they don't tend to be scary because Fiasco is a very funny game. And so that's why it's low on the list, is because it hasn't produced any actual fear. But you can still do some good stories with it. Next up, yes, I'm doing Curse of Strahd. I actually find that this game not only does it do a great job of wrestling D&D into a gothic horror tone, which is already pretty miraculous by itself, but it is able to produce terrifying moments. I have absolutely scared some players pretty hard in the past by running this game and doing this game correctly. And if you have a bunch of players who are willing to be scared, and if you as a game master lean into all the gothic horror elements that are there, some of the defining features of gothic horror are the idea that something bad is going to happen and you can't escape from it, right? Modern day vampire stories are all like, there's a vampire, I'm going to attack it. Whereas back in the day, Anne Radcliffe and stuff like that, there's a monster, and there's nothing I can do to get away. It's just there, and I'm mesmerized by it, or I am too weak to overcome it, or whatever it is. This sense of mounting dread and inevitability is something that Curse of Strahd actually does really well. So, kudos to them for that. Now, we get to the first of the two Palladium games that are on my list. Dead Rain actually is not on this list. It just got edged out by some other stuff. But Beyond the Supernatural. I did earlier this week a video about Beyond the Supernatural, and that's what's here on my list. It's a really great horror role-playing game that I like because of all the weaknesses inherent in the use of psychic powers. The characters feel like flawed people who are doing their best in a bad situation, and that don't really have the tools to go head-to-head action movie against the monsters, and they have to find other ways to solve those problems. Really love that. Next up, Call of Cthulhu. The current edition of Call of Cthulhu, the game system is good, but some of the supplements are stellar. In fact, this one right here, Berlin the Wicked City, best horror game adventure campaign, whatever, that I have ever read. Hands down, there's no question about that. So, Call of Cthulhu, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Berlin the Wicked City. Absolutely hit all the right notes for me as being just a phenomenal game. Now, we're into the top 5 now. So here we go, number 5, Vampire the Masquerade. And as I have said in my Vampire the Masquerade video, I didn't get into this game until 5th edition, which I know a lot of old school people don't consider to be canonically true or accurate to Vampire the Masquerade or the World of Darkness. And I can't speak to that because I haven't played those old games. I have played Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, and I love it. I love the focus that it has on survival without being a survival game. I love the focus that it has on hunger, where you don't necessarily want to go out. Maybe, especially in the early stages of a campaign, you've just become vampires and you don't want to kill anybody, but you need that blood and your hunger is getting worse and worse. And if you don't sate it in an appropriate way, it might come out in a wildly inappropriate way thanks to a bad die roll with the hunger mechanic. I love the way that this game focuses on the dark, horrible aspects of being a monster. And that can be difficult to play through, but it can be very rewarding, I think, to deal with that concept of moral compromise and of loss and of pushing forward in a bad situation, and what are you willing to do to survive. All of those elements come together just really beautifully. Big fan of Vampire the Masquerade. I should put in a plug that I have also one of the campaigns that I am currently running is a Vampire the Masquerade rules used to play What We Do in the Shadows. And I've done What We Do in the Shadows with Fate, and I've done it with Vampire. I love playing that kind of comedic, farcical version using the Vampire rules, because the rules are so edgy and they're so kind of self-important in a way. And I say that in a good way. I love the fact that you can take what feels like a very emo game that is all, very edgelordy if you play it one way, but without changing a single thing, you can go in this completely comedic other direction. I think people who dislike Vampire, what they dislike is a very specific subset of Vampire players, or of how certain players play the game. The game itself can actually be used in a lot of different ways. It's a more robust rule set than you're probably giving it credit for. Anyway, next is my second Palladium game. This is 4 on my top 10 list, counting down. Nightbane. I adore Nightbane as a game, and for very similar reasons to Vampire the Masquerade. It is a game about being a monster and trying to do the right thing anyway. Vampire doesn't necessarily require you to try to do the right thing, right? You can just embrace the idea that you're a vampire and move on and do some horrible things. Nightbane is a little more heroic than that. It's a melding of angsty vampire gaming with hack and slash Monster Hunter gaming, and very high power levels and some very weird ideas. But that core concept that you are a monster is still there. And what I like to do when I run the game is lean into that. And this idea that you want to do the right thing, but most of the time the only way you can help people is by becoming a monster. And if the people you're trying to help see how monstrous you are, they will not like you anymore. And so you can be saving people and losing them emotionally at the same time. And I really like that. Also, the game just has a lot of great opportunities for horror. But anyway, let's move on. Now we get into number 3, and this is where we're going to get into games that actually are very, very effective at producing outright fear in players. And this is where we get to Dread. Dread is justifiably famous as a horror game. It's designed as a one-shot, and if you haven't heard of it before, I've got a video you should go watch. But the basic mechanic is that instead of using dice for any kind of task resolution, you use a Jenga tower. And what this does, you set this up in the middle of the table, and anytime somebody is going to do something that might be difficult, they have to pull a block from the tower. And you can always decide, well, I'm not going to pull this block, I'm going to leave it here, in which case you just fail to do the thing. And if you pull the block out and the tower doesn't fall, you succeeded, congratulations. If you pull the block out and the tower does fall, your character dies instantly. And that is the primary mechanic of the game. And what this does, as you can imagine, is create this incredible sense of, yes, dread, where your players are all sitting around the table and maybe they back away from it and nobody wants to touch it, nobody wants to bump it. I've seen groups where they stand up when it gets to a certain point, and people just, you get into this situation where you want to do something, but you're absolutely afraid of doing anything because then that tower might fall down. and then you're going to die. And it really helps make the game feel real, which is what I love about these kind of unique mechanics for an RPG, where if you can meld the mechanical function that makes the game work with the storytelling and the narrative and the tone that you're trying to create, that's a home run. And Dread is absolutely a home run in that sense. Now, the character creation system for Dread is kind of a big onerous mess, and I think that there are easier ways to deal with it. But that basic resolution, you're going to be surprised if you've never played it before how effective it is at scaring your players. It's really wonderful. So, moving on, number 2, my top 2. What's it going to be? It's Alien from Free League. Alien is... Everything about this game is very simple. It's very minimalist, but done in such a way as to produce fantastic levels of spooky atmosphere and, yes, often outright terror among the players. And one of the reasons that works, for me, across the board, one of the hallmarks of a good horror game is if you can get players to make bad, suboptimal decisions. Because the story has taken over. And they know how to win, quote unquote. They know how to solve the problem. They know how to fight the monster. They know how to do whatever it is that they have to do in order to survive. But instead of doing that, they're caught up in the story and they do something else. They run upstairs when they should run outside. They, face a monster instead of, fleeing from it. Or alternately, they run away from a situation that they could otherwise win if they stood and fought. As soon as the players let that story and that role-playing element take over, that's when it becomes magical as a horror game, because the fear becomes real and the attitudes become so much better. I love it. And Alien does a great job with that, the way that it is working through, giving characters secret agendas that they are trying to pull off. I don't think campaign play works as well in this game as they would like it to. What really makes this game work is what they call cinematic play. The idea that you're going to play a story in a single session or maybe 2 or 3 sessions and then be done, which means that players, or characters rather, can die and can die horrifically. And so the campaign play kind of has a sense of plot armor to it, where your characters are either not going to die horribly or they're going to die horribly so often that you don't get attached to your characters. Cinematic play shrinks that focus down and recreates that great feel of the movies where you know that there's a monster somewhere and you're doing everything you can to live through it. And on top of that, you might be running out of ammo or air or any of these other vital resources that you need in outer space. So, Alien, wonderful. Now, if you've watched any of my videos at all, you can probably guess what my top number 1 horror game is going to be, because I rave about it all the time, and it is 10 Candles. 10 Candles is justifiably famous for being a wonderful horror game. And in fact, this entire first page of their website is just, thing after thing, rave after rave from all of these reviewers and players and famous people and stuff. What 10 Candles does, similar to Dread, similar to Fiasco, it is designed for a one-shot game. What it does very differently is, first of all, during character creation, which is all part of the thing. You can get through a whole session from 0 to everyone's dead in about 3 hours, give and take, depending on if the facilitator knows what they're doing and so on. But you start off by defining just a couple of core attributes about who you are as characters. And as you do, you'll be lighting some candles. And you just use those little tea lights, that are about this tall and this big around. And you have these 10 candles sitting around the table. And once everything's ready, the characters are created, the scenario is kind of sort of established, and the candles are lit, you turn off the lights so that the only illumination are the candles themselves. And then you go. And there is a die rolling mechanic that is incredibly simple. And all you really need to know about it to pique your interest and whet your appetite is that as soon as somebody fails a die roll, you blow out a candle and you lose a die out of the pool. And when the last candle goes out, everybody dies. Everybody. There's no living through this game. That is the first and most important rule. This is not an action horror game or a psychological horror game. This is a tragic horror game in which everybody is going to die. And so the story is more about dealing with death and accepting it, and about telling a good story, and about exploring how we get to that point. What is going to happen that kills us? And it can be so great. Absolutely, without exception, my favorite horror experiences in gaming have come from 10 Candles. It's a game that I take to conventions when I go to cons or to conferences, and I love to run it with people. It can be difficult to run it in a con environment because you don't want to set off the hotel smoke alarms or whatever. But I've done it and I've made it work, and it can be a lot of fun. And all you need are just a handful of dice and a handful of candles. And it's a wonderful game. So, 10 Candles, Dan's favorite horror role-playing game of all time. So, thank you for watching this. This was fun. It was less of a review, more of a commentary. Like I said in the beginning, I'm going to start trying to do these maybe one a week, replacing one of the other reviews. So we'll get 2 reviews and then a commentary every week, and we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if it is. Maybe everyone who's been asking me to do commentary videos is going to be like, no, okay, we're sick of your opinions, go back to just reviewing games. But anyway, thanks for watching this one. Let me put out a little final plug at the end for a couple of things. First of all, as I say in my introduction to every video, I am an author. I write books. I've got 18 published books, many of them horror, such as The Hollow City, which is new on Audible this year, and I Am Not a Serial Killer, which is the first of my 6-book series of horror novels, adapted into a fantastic horror movie starring Christopher Lloyd. And you can go and look these up if you would like to read them. I've got a bunch of other books that are less horror and more science fiction and fantasy and things like that. But those are the horror ones. Also, a little plug for Extreme Makeover, which is a science fiction novel that I wrote that is, in my opinion, the most terrifying thing I've ever written. Even if scene by scene it is not clearly and obviously a horror novel, it's the one that freaks me out the most on some kind of existential level. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and I hope that you have a chance to play some of these games and read some of my books. Anyway, thanks for watching. I will talk to you later. I'm Dan Wells, and you are awesome.